Hi, I'm Val Benavidez, and I'm the Outreach Director for the Texas Freedom Network. Thank you so much for having me here today. We have enjoyed lots of support from your organization, and we like our partnership very much, and I'm thrilled to be here to give you an update. What I'm going to do today is quickly talk about TFN, our work at the legislature, and our work right now at the State Board of Education. So for those of you who don't know us, the Texas Freedom Network was started in 1995 by then Governor Ann Richards' daughter, Cecile. And we were started because as they were campaigning for her failed re-election bid, they noticed a strong and vibrant grassroots organizing movement and political movement of the radical religious right in the state. So we were formed in a reactive manner to be a counter, a mainstream counter to that voice. And for 18 years, we haven't missed a beat because there's so much work to do, as you all watch and follow. So the three pillars that we work on are protecting religious freedom, defending civil liberties, and strengthening public schools. So you'll see the issues that we work on fit under those. We work at all levels. So by that, I mean we work with local people in communities if they want to be on their school health advisory committee or they want to get involved in testifying before the legislature or the state board. We organize grassroots. We also do direct lobbying at the legislature and at the State Board of Education. Here we go. Okay. So the legislature is happening right now. So these are just a quick update. There is a lot more information on our website. It's tfn.org, and there's a legislative watch page you can go to read more in depth about any of these or for fact sheets. So Sharia law. This was filed again this year, has had a hearing, and essentially what this bill aims to do is something that doesn't need to be done. It creates additional fear-mongering, an anti-Muslim bill. What it says is that it can't, in matters of family law, that there is a threat that Sharia law could creep in those occasions, and so the basic premise is that it can't because it's guarded against by the Constitution, and this is duplicitous. So that's Sharia law, but it's still moving along. Religious freedom constitutional amendment. This is actually having a hearing tomorrow. So what this does is it's trying to make a constitutional amendment to the Constitution of Texas, saying that you do not have to do anything that is outside of your religious convictions. But the issue that this bill poses is that it doesn't have any limitations on it. So there is something else called RFRA, the Religious Freedom, I forget that. Restoration Act. That was done with Scott Hochberg, bipartisan support, I think in 1997 is when that was passed. And that is very detailed. It's many, many pages long, and it says that there has to be substantial damage and substantial threat of substantial problems so that the individual would occur. This bill doesn't. It's very, very broad. So we'll be testifying against that bill tomorrow, or that constitutional amendment tomorrow. C-Scope. How many of you have heard of C-Scope? So C-Scope is a curriculum management tool that's been around for over a decade that was developed to help teachers. We have over 1,000 school districts. It's to help them be able to supplement and augment what they need to teach in the Texas Essential Knowledge and Skills. So it's online materials, other types of materials. So lately, the radical right has decided that C-Scope is allowing for things like communism to be taught and all kinds of other crazy theories. So they want C-Scope to be under the review of the State Board of Education. So we don't necessarily think, we think the State Board has their hands full right now, and that adding C-Scope as another component of curriculum that they should review and manage is a terrible idea. So Senator Dan Patrick is the ringleader of this bill, and that is definitely one to watch. 10 Commandments and Prayer in Public Institutions. This is a resolution that would say that you can say the word God in prayer at schools, at any type of public event, that you can have the 10 Commandments there. So we and the ACLU have thoroughly passed out information letting everyone on the committee know that this is in fact unconstitutional by the Supreme Court. So we're waiting to see. They are actually taking that to the, I think it's the Legislative Budget Board, the place where bills are created and the lawyers confer on things to discuss the constitutionality of this. We believe it's completely unconstitutional. Nevertheless, it still is introduced and still moving along in the process. So sex education is another issue we work a lot on, and so-called abortion affiliates. This bill, what it is trying to do is kick Planned Parenthood out of schools. So we work a lot with school health advisory councils. They are a committee that is comprised of educators, parents, students who decide the curriculum that they want to use to teach sex education. The other side obviously does not think that Planned Parenthood has any business in that. We think Planned Parenthood gives great sex education material and curriculum that is they abide completely within the confines of the education code when they do that. The biggest issue we have, though, is not the Planned Parenthood issue, just that this is a local control issue. If a local community has decided upon what is best for their community, that's not something that we think the other side, well, not the other side, it's not something that we think anyone should be taking away or legislating their control away from them. So that bill has had hearings in both the House and the Senate. It is passed in the Senate, but not the House, and we think it will be dead in the House now. Birth control, did any of you hear about the Hobby Lobby bill? Some of you? So this was a bill that said basically that if employers like Hobby Lobby don't want to follow the federal guidelines of the ACA, so they don't want to provide birth control to their employees, that they don't have to, and furthermore, for the penalties they receive, the state should be reimbursing them for that. So this bill it was scheduled for a hearing and then pulled down for a hearing. We think the reason is because there wasn't a fiscal note on this bill, and if you put a fiscal note on that bill, it would be billions of dollars that the state would be liable for. So we don't expect that to go anywhere, but that's what the Hobby Lobby bill does. And then vouchers and tax credits. So I don't know if any of you have followed vouchers this session, but lately what has been happening is that when the House went over its budget bill 2 weeks ago, they had a vote on vouchers. So saying that Abel Herrero put it forward, saying I would like to make sure that nothing in this bill, no public money that is for education can be used for vouchers or any other types of programs that takes money away from public schools or from the permanent school fund. So that was a record vote, and it was 108, I think, to 30-something, which is a pretty heavy slam, pretty heavy shutting up the door for vouchers this session. And tax credit. Senator Patrick and Senator Campbell still have bills going. They're still having hearings, but if the House is that far decided against these things, we do not think that this will be an issue this session. So, if anybody I can talk more about the legislature. I just wanted to give you some quick snapshots because I have 2 film clips I really want to show you. A big piece of our work is this Texas State Board of Education. It's a little known body. How many of you know who represents you on the state board? Still a little known body, even in one of the most active civic engagement groups. It's a little known body with far-reaching power. So they're a 15-member board and they're elected in partisan elections. They have the largest district of any elected official in the state. Huge. 1.6 million constituents roughly per district. And they are responsible for managing the permanent school fund and creating the curriculum standards and adopting textbooks that governs all education from kindergarten to 12th grade in public schools. That is a lot of power. So there have been several culture awards at the SBOE. Environmental science, history, health, English language arts, science, social studies, science again, and we are in a year of science again. So this will be science this year and social studies next year. So I would tell you lots and lots about it, but we have this great clip. So there was a documentary filmmaker, Scott Thurman, who traveled around with TFN for years, and not just TFN. He traveled around with board members, with tons of other people, participated in every board meeting and made this documentary. Have any of you seen this? So it was on PBS, on Independent Lens, a couple of weeks ago. We actually have some educational copies of the film. So if you're interested in doing a screening of the whole film, you can, and we can get a copy to you to use for that. But I want to go ahead and play 2 clips for you. Okay.
I think we should be teaching evolution the way we teach it at the university level. We should be teaching the scientific consensus on this. The high school classroom is no place to fight the culture wars. If the criticisms of evolution become established science, fine. That's great. It'll trickle down into high school.
Are you aware that in the last 20 years, we have not had a section on intelligent design or creationism?
That's correct. What you were discussing now is whether you will teach the denigration of evolution, which is a long-time creationist strategy to promote creationism through the back door.
Have there ever been any evidence of evolutionary fraud?
Of course.
Should we be allowed to teach that as examples of bad science?
Certainly. Just like you can teach examples of political chicanery.
Thank you.
Pray with me, please. Father, we thank you for an opportunity to come together again and discuss the business of public education in our great state. As we deliberate now, we ask that you would give us wisdom and discernment as we make important policy decisions. Help us to implement our decisions in the best way possible. Pray in Jesus' name. Amen.
It was clear that there were not 8 votes to force the strength and weaknesses language into the curriculum standards. Unfortunately, some members of the board, I believe, were fearful of the politics of teaching evolution, and they felt a need to engage in a compromise with the far-right members of the board so that it couldn't be a clear win or loss for anyone. That compromise process began with some language that actually a genuine expert, Dr. Ron Wetherington from SMU, he had introduced some language talking about analyze and evaluate scientific evidence for the theory of evolution. Cynthia Dunbar seized upon analyze and evaluate because she saw the political potential and capital in that language.
I was not choosing words from a political standpoint. It was just analyze and evaluate that Ron Wetherington had put forward. I knew from my scientific background that that was appropriate language to use, and we wanted that pertaining to all scientific theories.
She convinced Bob Craig, the Republican from Lubbock who's one of the moderates, to work with her to develop language that says analyze and evaluate using scientific evidence all sides of the theory of evolution. And it's the all sides that will likely present problems when textbook publishers begin their work drafting textbooks.
The motion is, after testing, to insert the words including, examining all sides of scientific evidence. Do we have copies? We're not going to discuss it until we get a copy. Just take a 5-minute break.
One thing that you should understand about the State Board of Education is that every single time the board takes a break, a board member is surrounded by people lobbying from both sides of this issue.
That's what the other board is saying. You don't understand what the pressure that we're at.
A vote in favor puts this in the teeth. All those, we'll take a record vote. Okay, the motion carries 13-2. Mr. Nunez and Mrs. Berlanga voted no.
It was a loss. Yes, we shut the door to the urging that we teach, quote, strengths and weaknesses. But we threw the windows open to creationists and intelligent design theorists trying to insert that stuff in our textbooks in the future by the new adoption of examine, quote, all sides of the debate.
Yesterday, we had a vote where they left out the strengths and weaknesses language, which to a lot of people made me think, look, the board must want to allow censorship and no discussion. Then we had the vote today, adding the language of examining all sides and the word critique into the current standards that have now been adopted. That's just as good as saying strengths and weaknesses, if not better.
I personally don't know what all sides mean. I don't know what all these mean, but I know it's bad. And that first one I like to look at is section 112.34, which was strike 7B. There's a fear that those who may have some ulterior motive will use that to introduce something that we don't believe is sound science.
So I've been sitting here reading and I'm thinking, okay, what are we instructing our teachers to do? Okay, in A, we're talking about evolutionary theory, universal common ancestry, and they're looking at how that evidence is provided among groups, and you can read the list. Right now we need to take it a step further. We need to bump it up. We need to engage our students even more. And so with Dr. McElroy's additional language, it kind of period at the end of the sentence is how I think of it.
Access to the there's no explanation. It is an explanation.
So, why are they not changed? Let's let our kids talk about that. I think it's a fantastic take and I support it.
This is the one that I didn't understand last time and ended up voting for it. But I learned something that I should not vote on things that I really don't understand, and it does a disservice.
This standard represents questions that our students can handle. It is so scientific. It's not complicated. It doesn't take mathematics. I disagree with these experts. Somebody's got to stand up to experts that are just, I don't know why they're doing it. They're wonderful people. The fossil record does do it. Why take it out? The textbooks would say there's the sudden appearance that does raise problems for the idea of common ancestry. Thank you for letting me make my plea. And I would really like you to think before you push this button. Thank you.
The vote is 8-7. The language will be struck.
What's happening is ideology is triumphed science. The reason the board members voted the way they did was because the scientists told them to. This is what they said. And that's not what the scientists are not. They lost their luster because the evidence doesn't support it. The evidence doesn't support it. The evidence doesn't support it.
To both the teachers, that they have academic freedom to allow and encourage discussion within the classroom, and also to
There are not many board members who say, I am an expert in string theory. I am an expert in gravitational theory. And I will talk to you about that, but then sure talk to you about evolution. And that is a mixture of ignorance and arrogance, which is a flammable mixture.
Ms. Miller.
Had a question. Just would somebody explain to me what stasis is?
Dr. McElroy, you were wonderful at explaining this.
Stasis is just the equilibrium of an organism when you see it in the fossil record. When you first see it, as you go up those from old rock layers to new ones, all of a sudden something appears. Stasis is just the term that it's equal. It just stays the same, and when it disappears, it's still the same. And that's just a fact in the fossil record.
Okay, the question is...
Mr. Chairman, I have taken the vote. We called the vote. I'm sorry.
I'm going to stand for this one. I haven't had a chance.
Okay, that's fine. Okay.
I think you need to use your brain. You make a decision, yes or no, or you abstain. We need to do it thoughtfully, but the time comes for leadership, and sometimes that leadership means you just have to make a choice.
We'll take a recorded vote on this. So 13 yeses and 2 noes. The motion passes.
I would like to thank my fellow board members. That is wonderful. It covers the words sudden appearance and stasis. which is data. It's probably a lot better than the standard I wrote. Thank you.
Are there any further amendments? And I
It's really disappointing to see this happen because the standards that the Board of Education got from the writing committees were pretty decent when it came to evolution. And they just amended the dickens out of them, and now we've got standards that are very distinctly compromised in the creationist direction.
Thanks for all your work.
What this means is that there's going to be pressure on the publishers to put this into the textbooks. And that's too bad, because that doesn't help the science education of kids in Texas very much.
The way I would understand it, if I speak for the other board members that changed their votes, they were trying to balance these two key demands. They had these pro-evolutionist side that said this language was unscientific. They had this other side that said we want you to support the strengths and weaknesses, so they came up with a compromise. They got rid of the bad language, and therefore they voted to support the new standards. Frankly, it was great. It was a failure of strategy of Eugenie Scott's what it was. And Kenny Miller. Along the way, so faith, hope, and cheer.
You've been quoted as saying that the earth is 6,000 years old.
That's my personal belief.
You said, I disagree with these experts. Someone has to stand up to them. Scientific consensus means
you at least get that you're a point of significant controversy in the state of Texas.
Oh, absolutely. And I think you need to have a board that's willing to take some controversy and to make some controversial decisions. I'm embarrassed by that. I'm embarrassed that I said it. I'm afraid of it.
Can you perceive how that might create controversy?
Right.
Can you see?
I agree.
You said education is too important not to be politicized.
That's right. It came across the wrong way. The only reason I got involved in education is because I see all children as created in God's image. How do I know? The Bible tells me so. Isn't that a cool song?
God has always treated me very fairly. I find him very congenial as a person. And he has always been, I think, fair in conducting all the public testimony and public hearings. What I find objectionable is the conflict between his ethical responsibility to foster the letter and spirit of the law in TEA science mandates and his personal conviction as a young earth creationist that evolution has never happened and that the belief in evolution is atheistic.
Leaders must lead, and Dr. McElroy has proven conclusively that he is less concerned with leading the board than he is with fighting the battle. Members, let's lead him to his battle. And let's request the governor find a true leader to chair the Texas Board of Education.
A little bit of how the state board operates. Don was not, his nomination was not confirmed. He was still on the board. Gail Lowe was then the chair. Don did not win his re-election. Thomas Ratliff won his seat and is still a current member of the SBOE and a moderate Republican. This is a good way to see how the state board works, because the issue with the state board is that we firmly believe, wrong way. The problem is that it is still a system that allows politicians and not experts and educators to write these curriculums, adopt these curriculums. So I think originally the thought of the board and the way that the board functioned for many years was that the writing teams were the academics and the experts and the people who worked with the curriculum every year in their field of study would prepare the TEKs, give them to the board, and the board would approve them unless there was some sort of serious flaw. But what has happened with this iteration of the board for over the last decade is that now almost every subject has some type of controversy because there's almost certainly some aspect of whatever that curriculum could be that they're opposed to or that they want to change. So where you see people suddenly talking about evolution as if they are an evolutionary scientist and speaking, from their desk and saying, like, I have something that I want to propose, and within the next 10 minutes that's being approved. It's either being approved or rejected, and it has immediate consequence into the writing of those standards. So it's a very serious issue at the board and one that we are almost always constantly monitoring. So this was when they were adopting the standards. What has happened since then is the process has opened for science publishers to put in their intent, to put in the copies of the materials, and that is all happening now. We sent out alerts about people to self-nominate themselves to the review teams, because review teams are now happening. They have been populated, and now people will start reviewing these materials. There's, I think, over 2,000 different pieces of materials on all subjects of science. So this will culminate this November with the board adopting an approved and rejected list of textbooks. So as Eugenie Scott said, the threat now is that publishers will feel that they need to respond to the way in which these text were written, so that we will be doing everything we can and working with experts and scientists and people to review all of these texts as well to try to make sure, to try to ensure the integrity of the subjects like evolution and environmental science at the SDOE. So, does anyone have any questions about that?
Who are the members of the Board of Education?
Sure.
And how do they get elected? Or how are they put in place?
Sure. So they are elected in partisan elections every 4 years, and they're staggered, so half the board is staggered. So that they're not all up at the same time. They range, that's Ken Mercer. Is that Ken Mercer? David Bradley. It's David Bradley. So David Bradley is an insurance salesman from the Houston area. There are very few educators or people who have experience with the public education system. Some people have children who've, schooled them in private schools. Some people, like Cynthia Dunbar, who's no longer on the board, hold beliefs that providing public education in this country is an unconstitutional thing and that we shouldn't do it. So many people who are on the board are politicians, and they don't have a background as being an education expert, because there's no requirement that you should. So they come from all different walks of life.
It said that Rick Perry appoints
yes.
Just the leader.
The chair. Yes, so the governor, the way the system is currently set up, the governor appoints the chair from a current member of the board. And then that person that he appoints their nomination has to be confirmed by the Senate when the Senate is during a legislative session.
You called him a moderate Republican. What kind of that?
Not this one. Not this one. Sure, Thomas Ratliff.
Right.
So that is having more, interest in educators, upholding standards, not voting with this block of people who would vote to change the standards on evolution, those types of things are what makes them right.
Why aren't there educators on the board? Can they not get elected? They don't have the money?
It's a little mixed. There are some educators on the board. Mavis Knight from Dallas was a former teacher and has had her seat for a very long time. Lawrence Allen was a former educator in the HISD school district and has been on the board for quite some time as well. But it is a mix. It is a daunting task. I'm sure, as you know, from having run for a seat before, it is a daunting task to take on running for the State Board of Education. One of the issues is that no one knows anything about the State Board of Education. So then when the candidates come up into that, they are faced with an enormous opposition, some because some of the incumbents just are the incumbents, so people just vote for them because they don't know that they shouldn't. And then some is that in some of those areas, they're highly organized. So they have a lot of friends, they have a lot of money, they've built up time, and so it is a very big undertaking. But there are many good candidates who do run.
And also the churches provide a very strong network for that particular group of five, a gang of five or so. So my representative is a former teacher. He is also choir director for his church. I don't know how those two mix.
In the current system of the Texas State Board of Education is obviously flawed in that, fundamentally, in that it's politicians elected to form curriculum. Has there been any advocacy to dissolve and reform the State Board of Education with requirements for?
Yes, TFN has put forth a slate of bills almost every session that is related to changing the State Board of Education. One was that you don't have a board, you have a committee, that's the Commissioner of Higher Education, that's the TEA, the head of TEA, that you have people who are appointed to certain positions be that committee that is then the board, not elected politicians in the same way. We've had other amendments that deal with the way the board is now that say that you can't put an amendment up. Like, I can't just say, like, I don't like ice cream, and I think ice cream should be out of every single, place where it is written into this description of whatever, about some important part of the text. And then a few minutes later, I could lobby you, we could vote on it, and then ice cream's gone. So we've put up legislation to try to say you can't propose amendments that don't have any time for peer review or for scientists and experts to give opinions and feedback before you would vote on them immediately. So
That's the Watson Stroma
yes,
bill right now, which isn't going anywhere.
right, exactly.
It isn't going to.
No, so the same problems that you see that we face here are also magnified at the current, who is currently in office at the legislature and what are their decisions. The things that happen with this nomination, this TEACS review process and put us into the national spotlight as a laughingstock, that's why Kirk Watson did what he did in getting Don his nomination rejected. That is not the current tenor. It's been a little bit of time has gone by. So when those things occur, they seem to kind of want to do a little more, but it's an ebb and flow.
There was a time several years ago when they dissolved the State Board of Education, the elected board, and put it in an appointed board, but then they had a change of heart and went back to it. And I don't remember exactly the rationale. I don't know that it worked better or worse when they were appointed, but it depends a lot on who the governor is as to what kind of moron, what in them.
But with requirements for the individuals, at least you could say you have to have some kind of expertise in education to get on the board.
And we have tried as well to put in bills and to have them themselves, because they can put requirements forth at the beginning of their board meeting and make resolutions and adopt certain policies. We've tried on both fronts, the legislature and lobbying this board, to put in standards around who's an expert, because another issue is that they're allowed to bring in experts to review this curriculum, to review all curriculum. And so sometimes the people that they choose aren't actually experts in the way that we would view an expert, people who don't have to write, peer-reviewed academic pieces, who shouldn't necessarily be. We don't believe those people should be reviewing science as an expert.
Is there a revolving door, or is there limits on how long they can be a board member?
A lot of times what happens at this board is, you can be a board member for a very long time. Mary Helen Berlinga was a board member for almost 30 years. Tyncey Miller has been a board member off and on for almost 30 years. But what happens in many cases is sometimes this functions like a springboard. So Marsha Barney was recently elected 2 cycles ago to the SBOE, and she's now a state rep. So sometimes it is a political springboard, or the other issue here is that the State Board of Education manages the permanent school fund, which is billions and billions and billions of dollars. So that is a very powerful thing to be. So there are also other types of things that could occur.
Is a seat on the SBOE more powerful than a representative seat? Why would you want to be demoted to representative?
I think it's more powerful. It depends on what your interest is. So if your interest is public education, this certainly would be more powerful.
Are they salaried employees of the state? Because I saw what Rob, he's a dentist as well.
Right.
So is this like a career, like do they
No.
get?
No, I think there are certain portions of like their travel is covered. There are certain things related to when they're doing state business that is paid for, but they all have other professions or means of, it's not in the same way that other positions do.
Is this full film available online?
So it is not right now. It was briefly, it aired on an independent lens at the end of January, I think. We have purchased 2 education copies at TFN. So, because I don't think the film is yet out for like sale on Amazon for cheap. It's right now it's really expensive. It's like $600 a copy. So we have 2 copies at TFN. And one of the things that we're doing is groups that are interested in watching the film, I will loan the DVD to you. You can show it to your group. You know, you sign that you promise to give it back, and then we won't charge you. So, but we have that, and I would be happy to make it available if someone wanted to host a screening of the full film. It's 82 minutes long.
I was just going to ask, state officials usually have state benefits. Do they get state benefits packages?
I'm not sure how much of a benefits package they get, but I'm certain that they must get. I'm sure they have something. Absolutely. So I think part of the appeal is the political relationship appeal aspect of being a board member. You know. So I want to leave you with one other clip for parting thoughts. It is a little long. It's about 10 minutes long, so it's going to go over your time frame. Is that okay?
What time is it now?
It's 1.
Oh, that's fine.
Is that okay?
Yeah.
Okay.
The social studies curriculum adoption was even more political, if that's possible, than the science adoption. And the separation of church and state is the crux of the battle. And when Mavis Knight introduced her amendment, she didn't even use the word separation of church and state. She used the words that government can't promote or denigrate any faith. And Cynthia Dunbar passionately argued against this.
Examine the reasons the Founding Fathers protected religious freedom in America by barring government from promoting or disfavoring any particular religion over all others.
Mavis Knight's amendment was too broad and too amorphous, and talking about barring, which speaks of it in a negative light, when how the Founding Fathers viewed it was in terms of jurisdiction, that the civil government did not have the jurisdiction to impede upon the ability of religious exercise.
Free exercise came from a sermon by William Cooper, where he specifically coined the phrase as to the free exercise of his holy religion. This debate is too broad, and one of the things that we keep being hounded by the other side is that the conservatives are trying to inject religion into the text. No, we're not. But nor do we want our religious history to be tainted and drawn from a viewpoint that is not historically accurate. So I cannot support this motion.
This will be a recorded vote. All those in favor of the amendments of a new 1C as proposed by Member Knight should vote yes. Opposed to the amendment should vote no.
I am stunned that this board rejected teaching students about the First Amendment to the Constitution's protections for religious freedom in this country, and that the government is barred from promoting or disfavoring any religious perspective over all others. That's just shocking, particularly since they've been proclaiming American exceptionalism, and this is one of our nation's founding principles that sets us apart.
Father, I ask that you would forgive us for taking prayer out of the schools. Father, when that happened, secular humanism flooded in. Father, it began to penetrate every part of the curriculum. But today, Lord, that you would invade our schools, invade our country, invade our homes, invade our churches with your presence, that we would truly be hunger for righteousness and for truth, because truth is not a thing. It is a person, and it is the person of Jesus Christ. And your word tells us that if you be lifted up, you will draw all men unto you. And so, God, that's what we do right now. We repent on behalf of our nation. We repent on behalf of ourselves and our families, God, and we lift you up, and we want to see you exalted, God. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
As we're here at the Lincoln Memorial, I think it's very fitting. I think ours is the greatest nation on earth. And I think that the framework of the constitutional republic that our founders crafted is brilliant and has preserved for us the greatest protection of our liberties. And I just want to make sure that that historical effort is documented as it is in these memorials in stone. I want it to be crafted in stone in our textbooks. Explain the impact of the writings of John Locke, Thomas Hobbes, Voltaire, Charles de Montesquieu, Jean-Jacques Rousseau, Thomas Aquinas, John Calvin, and Sir William Blackstone on political revolutions from 1750 to the present. It does take out reference to Thomas Jefferson, but the reason is not that I don't think his ideas were important, it's just that this is a list of political philosophers from which the founding fathers based their ideologies and their principles. Mr. Craig?
It appears to me that the workgroup members had specifically the desire to talk about the Enlightenment ideas and also to mention these particular individuals. Plus, I think Thomas Jefferson still needs to be there, so I will support what the workgroup members have recommended.
My intent was in no way to strike at Jefferson, to minimize his impact. I love Jefferson. I'm a huge fan. The problem is that Enlightenment, current day, is understood from the viewpoint of the secular humanistic ideology. If you want to see how those philosophers played out, look at the distinction between the French Revolution and the American Revolution. One was the secular humanistic Voltaire, anti-Judeo-Christian beliefs. The other was what Jefferson put forward in the Declaration of Independence, the laws of nature and nature's God.
When you have added people like Thomas Aquinas and John Calvin to the standard says the student understands how contemporary political systems have developed from earlier systems of government. Where does Thomas Aquinas fall in that? He doesn't.
Absolutely, Thomas Aquinas is the philosopher that started the original ideology of the laws of nature. And it's from that was developed all the political philosophies that brought forward foundations of civil jurisprudence. And the same thing with Calvin. No one knows anything of American liberty if they don't know of the writings of Calvin. The fact that they have not been included up to this point shows that there's a dearth of understanding of any kind of philosophy beyond Enlightenment.
Well, I think you're stretching it a bit. Certainly Plato in his Republic had a lot to say about government relationships to citizens that could have been added here as well.
Why isn't Thomas Jefferson seen as a leader of revolutionary thinking in the 18th and 19th century? He wrote the Declaration of Independence.
Right. Well, and actually, I'm really glad that you even put that forward because it's been misrepresented in the media a lot that Thomas Jefferson was actually stricken from the Teaks, which is not accurate. He's actually listed in several places throughout the document, including the political philosophies of the Founding Fathers.
I'm with John McElroy. He's considered the leader of the conservative bloc. Mr. McElroy, how's the meeting going?
We're a bunch of lay citizens on the State Board of Education, and we want to make sure that our children are taught good, solid American history, and I think we're in step with most of the majority of Americans.
Most gracious Heavenly Father, as we look to our past to guide us, let us reflect on the convictions of those who have gone before us. I believe no one can read the history of our country without realizing that the good book and the spirit of the Savior have from the beginning than our guiding geniuses. Whether we look to the first charter of Virginia, or the Charter of New England, or the Fundamental Orders of Connecticut, the same objective is present: a Christian land governed by Christian principles. I like to believe we are living today in the spirit of the Christian religion. I like also to believe that as long as we do so, no great harm can come to our country. All this I pray in the name of my Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. Amen.
Mrs. Carter. 18F, this would also be new, formulate generalizations on how economic freedom improved the human condition compared to communist command communities.
This is really the last minute. Today we're going to final vote on this. Have not been able to consult with anybody, and then here we are today at the last minute, looking at new language.
I've read it, I am thinking, and it is highly appropriate for students to learn to the value of the free enterprise system. Is there any further discussion?
I hear things like this is our privilege, and we are changing the intent of the writers.
Speak to the issue of the privilege of members to make amendments. I tend to remember this was in my job description.
Striking John Calvin and inserting Thomas Jefferson. The amendment fails. Mr. Mercer.
After John Calvin, I'd like to insert Thomas Jefferson and James Madison. Thomas Jefferson, James Madison.
We're changing everything in this section.
I'm proposing that under number 1, we delete constitutional republic and insert democratic society.
All those opposed? The amendment fails.
You have to have an objective in the standard. That's how you write standards.
I guess I just have to say, you have to trust me on this, but I actually do teach political philosophies at the doctoral level.
The amendment carries 11-3.
I wish to reinsert the name Oscar Romero.
I would like to offer an amendment. Motion to insert the name Hussein between the rocks.
I feel that I have let down the students in our state because all those kids that are in school right now and they get to college, they're going to learn for the first time the real history.
There is no way that we can go forward with this document. It's not representative of my district. It's not representative of
Explain instances of institutional racism in American society. All those opposed? The amendment fails.
We don't want to talk about discrimination. So there, these books, we don't want to read these. My gosh.
I am ashamed of what we have done to the teachers and to the students of this state.
The board is open for the vote. We're voting on second reading and final adoption of Chapter 113, Subchapter C, High School as amended. 9-5. Motion carries.
So science was awful. Social studies was horrific. It was everything from saying that instead of calling the United States a democracy, we were going to call it a constitutional republic. It was so much wordsmithing, taking out, Hillary Clinton and putting in the director of the Eagle Forum. There was so much political motivation in each section and each piece of it. Taking out Cesar Chavez, Thurgood Marshall, Dolores Huerta, because they weren't exemplary citizens for students to study. So, someone asked earlier, why would you want to be on the SBOE? I think if you were concerned, if you understood the power of public education and how that defined your civil society, that would be a very, very powerful place to be. So that last clip, we thought we wanted to add it. It wasn't originally in my presentation, but we really wanted to add it for you all because we thought that it would, it would speak to you and show you that it's at all levels. The State Board of Education, the legislature, local districts, it's pervasive everywhere. It is work that is very important and has to be done. So we try to bring as much awareness as we can about the work of the State Board of Education, because we do feel that it is incredibly important and essential work for the state. I'm happy to answer any questions if you want my.
Yeah, at the beginning you alluded to a constant religious freedom amendment in the Constitution, and that seems to be the new strategy of the religious right, talking not so much about like family values or morality, they still talk about that, but their political rallying cry the past year or so is like religious freedom.
Yes.
And so is the strategy to counter that going to evolve or change at all?
I think part of the strategy involves that isn't a true argument. In our country is very safeguarded against that already, and it still has we still firmly have the separation of church and state. So in many ways, with the SBOE, it's about pushing the boundaries and those lines. So strengths and weaknesses were not pushed in the same way in this science battle, because that was already ruled by the Supreme Court to be unconstitutional in Pennsylvania. So then this new language that was found was analyzed, and I forgot the other word. But the new language that was put in was meant to sort of open that again. So, but it is a tactic and a frame that we see over and over again.
Has there ever been any fiduciary misconduct or any under the table dealings with between these people and the book publishers? Has that ever come up?
Not in not that I have any evidence of.
They've got a lot of power,
Yes.
and I wouldn't be surprised if some payola or something like that going on.
You do have a lot of power. And in the past, I think in the movie, they talk about, an instance of the night before one of these adoptions, like John taking all the publishers out to have Tex-Mex and, have a discussion with people. So there are definitely blurry lines and instances of things.
Yeah, I just want to note that the publishers have no vested interest in what the state puts down their writers are actually not always happy that somebody wants to change their content. I mean, the publisher is certainly not complicit in something like this. I just want to make that clear.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the issue, and that is very true, what happens to the publishers is that they have a product to sell. So when horrible standards are passed, they're then forced with the option of being on the approved list or the rejected list. And if you're on the approved list, the state will pay for your school district's curriculum. If you're on the not approved list, that curriculum has to be bought out of their own funds, and obviously no school district has the ability to do that.
Isn't Texas we're from out of state until recently, doesn't Texas have one of the set of school books that the rest of the country?
Yes, it's a good
so
question.
there's extra power there that
And,
as soon as you make it at the Texas level really affect and can affect other parts of the country.
And we hope that over time with online technology that diminishes, but so far it hasn't. We still operate in a very bureaucratic system right now, which is that California and Texas are the two largest textbook markets in the nation, because they're so big, so that oftentimes publishers will then use those same curriculums throughout the rest of the country. So it has terrible, dominance.
Does Texas get economies of scale from having education so centralized?
I don't know. I don't think so. I mean, not in the same. I mean, it is in one way we have that, but I don't exactly.
This might be outside of this, but at the university level, is the same kind of influence, or does each university pick its own?
Universities are not governed in this type of system.
So there's
So
no
they
like
have
federal.
an entire other, and also that's a good point in terms of federal things. So AP classes are governed under the national education standards. So if, say they were to pass, something that even taught creationism or intelligent design of evolution in high school biology, if you were in AP biology, you wouldn't have that, because the textbook that you have in your AP course is dictated by a national standard, which is also a separate kind of inequality going on.
Do the teachers pay attention to this, or do they support this conservative nonsense, or what?
It's I think the teachers have a very, very hard job. And many teachers are involved in this. So many teachers are on those writing teams that write these curriculum standards. They didn't write these amendments that are made to the standards. What happens is that parents, teachers, retired, academics, people take time to go through all of these standards and come up with often really good standards that don't need to be changed. What you saw here is what happens at the board now, which is that there's just pages and pages of amendments where they're saying at the end, I'm ashamed of what we've done here. This isn't what the writing teams wanted. This isn't. So educators are participating in the way that they can and should. So it's not that educators aren't involved or are somehow missing something. This becomes political.
For the paper that I'm writing, I'm trying to figure out what the most effectual thing to put my time into writing is about. And it seems like there's a lot of political party strength that determines the candidacy for the State Board of Education. Is there a lot of interest groups that sway legislation, or like who's lobbying? I know it said in there's a lot of lobbyists that surround each board member. Who are the lobbyists?
So there's different advocacy organizations on both sides of it. So I could probably talk to you more afterwards, maybe like a list of them. But there are organizations that say, TFN might be working with the ACLU or with other organizations that are trying to preserve more of the protection of the separation of church and state. And there are other organizations that would be doing the opposite. So those are just different political interests. And that, yes, it would happen probably at all levels. I'm sure in their, home communities, there's also different networks of people and groups that would be doing the same thing.
Is there any movement to change the Constitution to decentralize it?
So we've talked about that before. Those aren't going anywhere. So even though things like that have been put forth as options, they do not have the current political, because of the rest of who is currently in control of the state, that is not their vision or their desire to change this entity in that way. So, like I said, my organization, other organizations work with many legislators who are supportive of reforms. Those packages of reforms don't go anywhere. They don't, not currently get passed.
Is TFN following HB 1525?
Which one is that?
It's the one that would allow religious schools to come in, or religious Bible study groups to come in right at the end of class.
Yes, and I think, I'm not sure if it had a hearing last week or if it's having a hearing this coming week, but our political department is following it, and you can go to, I don't think I'm actually connected to the internet right now, but if you go to tfn.org, on our issues button, there's a drop-down menu will come up, and there'll be one that says Legislative Watch. And if you click on Legislative Watch, they're all categorized by the category. So there's religious freedom, sex education, SBOE, and you just click on that, and all the bills that are on our agenda will come up, as well as any fact sheets or things that we've written about it. And there will be a link that will show you the current status of the bill as well.
Okay.
Anybody else?
Sure. Being that this is a group of minds readily available to take input, what do you think the most effectual thing for us to do to become a part to try to influence this? Is it more likely for us to be on the board without political clout, or is it more? What do we do?
I think the most important thing that people can do is participate and continue that awareness. Because of things like this science battle and the social studies adoption, because those were so big, and there were tons of grassroots supporters testifying in every public hearing. And that will happen again for science and for social studies moving forward. That helped do things like the legislature doesn't like it when we are a national laughingstock. So then things like what you saw with Don McElroy his nomination being rejected. There was a change. There has been some sea change in the legislature in this last electoral cycle. There are more moderates, we hope, we'll see as this is this is a new year and new meetings occur. So we'll see what that sea change has brought. So I do think that, it does matter that people pay attention, that people are involved in the process, and that people do give their input at the state board as well as the legislature and through voting and participating in civic